The message I have got is from. Okay, now hearing. Okay, good. Minimize. Mute. I have put it on the speaker view, which means whoever speaks will be coming on the screen. Meaning, in case your mic is not on mute, instead of my face, your face will be visible. Yes, we are almost there. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Let us start today's session, which is lesson 2 of the Elizarov lecture. I have to share my screen with you. And there is some audio lag, and in between I may have to stop screen share and go and admit some more people who are waiting. Welcome to the second lesson. Please keep your mics off, and once we finish the lecture, you will all get a chance to ask your questions. So as you are aware, I am your first course instructor, and Dr. Arvind Verma Jangid is your other course instructor. Dr. Jangid may join us a little late. Let him join. Today's lecture is about nailers, platers, plasterers, and wiremen. This is also a very short note on evolution and history of fracture management. How fracture management actually evolved. I'll just stop the share for a minute. Yes, we have a few more participants. I will admit them. Okay. Back to sharing screen. Share screen. Share. One minute, it's getting some problem. Darsh Gautam has to his mic.
Yes, I'm there.
Sharing my screen. The first bridge between bone setter and an orthopedic surgeon was Hugh Owen Thomas of Liverpool. He was from a traditional family of bone setters who eventually ensured that his nephew and children went to medical school and got the respect they deserved. He was in Liverpool, and he is the gentleman who has invented the Thomas's splint. Fractured femurs before that time were a great challenge for the surgeon to treat or a physician to treat, and long bamboo splints from mid-chest to the leg were wrapped up, causing great discomfort to the patient. He changed it to a very simple contraption which revolutionized the management of fractured femur. 1 minute. Robert Jones was his nephew, who actually popularized the Thomas splint, described it scientifically, and you can see a drawing in the lower half of the screen, which is from Watson Jones, Robert Jones' original paper. And you can see how much efforts they have taken to correct the angulation, giving a fixed traction, how much traction to give, ensure that enough bandages are there, pressure points are covered. That was the beginning of science. However, this man revolutionized the treatment of fractured femur. World War I and early World War II had lot of femoral fractures sustained during the war. A British soldier who broke his femur would eventually come back to the war after 12 to 18 months by when the war was over. However, German soldiers came back to the war front in 30 days. Englishmen were not aware that they had this inside their shaft of femur. And this gentleman, Gerhard Künchner, is a gentleman who invented the femoral nail. This humble-looking instrument has united more femurs than any other orthopedic implant known to us. And even today, in my opinion, the complication and non-unions from a Künchner nail is lesser than the far more expensive and unscientific locking nails if improperly applied. The gentleman above is Robert Danis, who the three AO founders consider as their guru, and he was the gentleman who invented the Danis's compression plate. You can actually see that there's a device with a screw here. There are only two screws, one above the fracture and one below the fracture. And then extra device is attached here. By tightening this nut, the plate is drawn this way so that the fracture is compressed. He was the one to propose the theory of primary non-union. Now I again have to temporarily stop sharing the screen because there should be some way of allowing members during screen share option. Let me see if I'm able to reduce the screen and with this itself go. Otherwise, because every time I come out of the presentation and go out to get some members, how do I invite the members? Wait a minute. Okay. We are here. No, we are back to the meeting. Oh, yes. Wait, I'll have to stop share for a minute and then only I will be able to get the members. Here we go. Admit. Okay, I've admitted them. And now I go back to screen sharing and I share this and we come back here and we go up and we expand. Welcome, Dr. Divakar. We were discussing evolution of fracture management. So here is Robert Danis, who invented his compression plate. And if you can see this miniature screw here, you tighten the screw and you compress the fracture. This is the gentleman who is actually the father of AO. He is also the inventor of Muller hip. I have had the great pleasure of staying in his house, which is a massive villa in the Swiss Alps. And he was probably the richest orthopedic surgeon in existence at that time, and probably for all times. Having his own personal helicopter and a helipad in his house, Morris Muller used to jettison round the world demonstrating, displaying surgeries. And then, of course, we have the wire man, the father of fixations in a new way, which we should be learning in this course, G.A. Elizarov. Before we proceed further, we have to just enumerate the rules of fracture healing. Fractures too follow rules like other universal things. You can see a segmental fracture of the humerus with intra-articular fracture of the humerus sequentially followed up, finally uniting with her shoulder and elbow function. First is Perkins rules. George Perkins was a British orthopedic surgeon who had very keen interest in fracture management, and he postulated the rules. Number one, fractures of the lower limb take twice as long as fractures of the upper limb. The reason is upper limb is closer to the heart and blood flow is gravity assisted, whereas lower limb venous return is against the gravity. Two, he said, transverse fractures take longer than oblique or spiral fractures. These days, we can describe it even better, saying that larger the fracture surface, faster the union, making all comminuted long obliques, grossly spiral, big butterfly fractures ideal for either conservative or minimally invasive managements rather than aggressive radiological management of opening, plating, cerclaging, killing the bone and causing osteomyelitis. Open fractures take longer than closed fractures, and consolidation takes double the time of union, meaning even after it's united, by not protecting them, it can go for either a deformation or a rebreakage until consolidation. Graham Appley was the past president of the British Orthopedic Association, a remarkable surgeon and a great humorist. He had said, bone healing is very much like sex. It needs two parts. They must be close to each other and there must be some movement between each other. This rule is one of the very pertinent rules, and it is Elizarov who has devised this apparatus which follows this rule closest as compared to any other means. John Charnley, again a great arthroplasty surgeon, famous for his Charnley hip, the orthopedic surgeon who should have been awarded a Nobel Prize, but due to politics was not awarded, has three laws. Proper compression of two cancellous bones forms a direct bone bridge between the two. Meaning, cancellous bone does not unite with large amount of visible callus, especially when compressed, and trabeculations go across the fracture site without difficulty. Second very important point he has mentioned again in his book, Close Treatment of Fracture, is increasing joint movements above and below the fracture signifies progress in union. Last, an uninjured joint never gets stiff if immobilized up to 6 weeks in any form of splint or plaster. Last, an uninjured joint never gets stiff if immobilized up to 6 weeks in any form of plaster. So whether it's an elbow immobilized in extension or a knee immobilized in full flexion, so long as the joint is not injured and your immobilization is not more than 6 weeks, after it moves the plaster, patient has to regain full movements. Sarmiento, my close friend, my co-author for one of the books, he knows Dr. Divakar also. He has 3 rules. Linear telescopic micromotion causes rapid bone healing. Second, vertical compression never produces a shortening exceeding that present at the time of initial injury. And number 3, early return to function by preventing harmful movements and encouraging beneficial micromotion causes rapid fracture healing. So he was the man who insisted that retain the biology and go back to function. Evo were the ones who insisted on early return to function at the cost of biology. However, Sarmiento was the one who said that you can respect the biology and still get back early motion. I have postulated certain rules. Number 1, internal fixation always delay fracture healing. Fracture heals despite fixation, not due to fixation. All diaphyseal fractures except a forearm can be managed conservatively with excellent results. The final outcome matching any internal fixation. Of late, we have started treating even forearms in extension casting, and we have got outcomes superior to those of plating. No scar and no second surgery. This is very important. No child below 6 years should be offered any surgery for any fracture except lateral condyle humerus. Below 6 years, it is considered criminal to operate, and pushing these tens and Nancy's and fancy nails and small plates and mini pediatric plates is only commercial, goes against the patient's interests. Not every fracture needs treatment. Many do better untreated. Keep 2 ends of fracture humerus in the same room and they will unite unless an orthopedic surgeon enters the room. Plates are a bad choice in weight-bearing long bones diaphysis. So never plate a humerus or a femur or a tibia. Try alternative means. Worst results of conservative management are far better than worst results of surgical intervention. At the most, you can get a deformity and a malunion with closed fracture, which can subsequently corrected by an osteotomy and straightening. However, multiple surgeries, pouring pus, and almost ending up to amputation are the worst results of surgery. And the last slide is very relevant to our class today. Bar Ilizarov, no surgical method hastens fracture union time. They only delay it. So if a fracture heals in 3 months in a plaster, with a nail it's going to take 6 months, and with a plate it's going to take 1 year. To understand how fractures behave and subsequently how Ilizarov concept will help us, we must have some idea about micromotion, callus formation, and post-fracture bone behavior. Fractures seem to have a mind of their own as far as their healing time is concerned. Identical fractures take different times in different individuals, even if they belong to the same age and sex. Whether treated by plaster or internal fixation, non-unions will occur. They have occurred and they will occur. Sir John Charnley was the first to prove that compression causes direct union. And this was the philosophy copied by Robert Danes and then subsequently used by Evo. So, Evo principles, founding principle, has been taken from John Charnley's wonderful and lifelong dedication to fracture management. Union without callus is called the primary bone healing. Union without callus is called the primary bone healing. There is no evidence of callus till consolidation stage. It bypasses the callus stage, and from fracture, it straight away goes to bridging stage. Linear telescoping throws a lot of callus due to dynamization. That is why an unlocked puncture nail will show abundant callus, whereas a locked interlocking nail will show minimal callus. Sometimes the fracture ends resolve and a fracture line becomes visible at a later stage. And finally, we have to dynamize the nail to see callus, which gives us a little peace of mind. This is a canine specimen that shows, 1 minute, somebody wants to join. Okay. I will give them a chance later because we can't afford to supply the sites. This is a canine specimen which shows union between tibia and femur after just 8 days of compression. You can see this line. This is junction between the two joints. Okay. This is the original case showing a union of an osteotomy in 33 days by compression alone. You can see this is a knee bent at 70 degrees. He has just straightened it, put just 2 rings and compressed it. And here it is. The osteotomy was done here. And you can see it is straightened. It has taken only 33 days. No plate, nail or plaster will unite 2 ends in 33 days. What we have studied in our first year of MS is that distraction causes atrophic non-union. Bone tissue cannot jump from here to here to cause healing. So they will atrophy. Rigid compression causes primary union without appearance of callus. So when the 2 fragments are compressed, callus is not seen. As with DCP, as with LCDCP, which are compression plates. Angular micromotion causes one-sided hypertrophy. So this part is together. There is no callus. This part is separated again and again and again. So gets callus. So this is like a horse hoof. That is called a one-sided hypertrophy. Rotatory micromotion will cause abundant callus but no sign of union. This is called an elephant foot non-union. Side to side shift causes distraction non-union where the ends will be smoothened out and some sort of fibrous tissue will join between the two without actual fusion of the bone ends. Dynamic, compressive, linear micromotion causes rapid union with healthy callus. So this movement, like a shock absorber or a telescope or a car antenna, up and down to a very small extent will cause brilliant callus for our satisfaction and much solid union. So in my book, primary union by compression plating is bad for the patient. Secondary union by visible healthy callus produces a stronger bone. There are no stress risers and there are no refractures. What I am now teaching you has all been taught during our college days, but then once we started operating after our MS, the commercial companies ensured that we forget this. So once AO philosophies and commercial orthopedics came in, they have whitewashed the science so that these fundamental facts are no longer on our mind. Let us look at the biomechanics and pathophysiology of the Hill-Dissolve system. Resistance to bending is called shear stiffness. So if any bending resistance is stiff, this is called shear force. Resistance to twisting is again shear stiffness. Uncoiling and coiling a spring. Resistance to collapse is axial stiffness. So if the two ends are like so, and you press, what happens? They collapse. So that's axial stiffness. Hill-Dissolve is the only fracture management system which provides absolute angular and rotatory stability while allowing 0.5 mm of linear telescopic micromotion. So if two ends of the bone are attached with circumferential rings and 360-degree threaded rods, the frame has got absolute stability against angulation, absolute stability against rotation, but allows linear compressive micromotion in the one favorable direction that Wolff's law wants. In Ilizarov, we have the following terminology: corticotomy, regenerate, bone transport, distraction osteogenesis, piano maneuver, and transosseous osteosynthesis. Before printing of Ilizarov's book, the name of the book is Transosseous Osteosynthesis. This terminology was not a part of medical literature, orthopedic literature, and in many cases, not even English dictionary. However, now these are the bywords and buzzwords which every Ilizarov surgeon uses when he discusses cases with one another. What is corticotomy? Corticotomy is a minimally invasive osteotomy. Technically, you cut the cortex alone without damaging the medullary blood supply. Though in theory it may not be always possible, but we make our efforts to produce a low velocity, low energy bone fracture at the site where we want. This is a special corticotomy chisel, which is like a fish mouth. You can see the periosteum is split, the chisel is introduced, and it is tapped this way, this way. Again, we come from this side and tap, and then we break the bone. In the next class, after we finish the Ilizarov apparatus, I will do a small video in which I will show you all these techniques. We have got 12 lessons and very extensive teaching, a lot of ground to cover. Regenerate. Regenerate is an English translation of a Russian word used to describe the new tissue generated as a result of lengthening or transport. Regenerate does not refer to bone alone. It refers to muscle, fascia, nerve, skin. And with Ilizarov, every single of them can be made to generate. You can see this. There is a corticotomy on the top. It is being distracted. And finally, you can see so much of regenerate happening. This will eventually consolidate. Bone transport. This is a fantastic concept where one treats a gap non-union. A corticotomy is performed proximal to the gap. The middle fragment is pulled away from the upper fragment, as in bone elongation, and as a consequence, the bone gap decreases and the middle and lower fragments are compressed together to form union. What I will do is these slides, I will make a PDF file and again post on the group so that you can look at them again at home and leisure and always keep a storage. In addition, I will also make a video recording of this and post it on a special site accessible only to those who have subscribed to this course. So this is a long segment bone transport by Ilizarov method. Born in red, that area was cut off. A gap was produced. A corticotomy is done on the top. Fragment is shifted down. And you can eventually see the end of 6 months, this much of new bone has formed, close to 6 inches of new bone has formed. The longest transport I have done is 11.5 inches in a femur. Close to a foot of bone has been generated. Ilizarov is the only system where you can create bone. In all other systems, you destroy the bone. With Ilizarov, you create the bone. Role of rate of distraction. How much to distract? This should be within the range of 1 to 1.5 millimeters per day. If you distract less than 1 millimeter, the bone might bridge too rapidly. If you distract more than 1 millimeter, the regenerate will become like a hourglass and you will have great trouble in making it joint. What is rhythm? You do not distract the whole 1.5 millimeters or 1 millimeter at one shot. It will be very painful and patient cannot tolerate it. So you transfer, you transport or distract 0.25 millimeter every 6 hours. This, how do you measure 0.25 millimeters? That is based on the thread and number of turns of the screw on the rod, which we will be describing when we come to the instrumentation. So 2.5 millimeter expansions 12 hours apart showed a decrease in osteogenesis. And 1 millimeter extraction every 24 hours slows down osteogenesis significantly. So as per original Ilizarov principle, you have to distract 4 times a day to 0.25 millimeters every time. The initial gap at corticotomy site should not exceed 2 millimeters. Now these are the numbers given by Ilizarov himself in his book Trans-Osseous Osteosynthesis. I will be loading that main thick book on our group immediately after this lecture, along with the PDF file of this talk by a Google Drive link, which you can download. And you can go through this again because it's a lot of scientific and technical terms. I have a habit of speaking very fast and rushing through slides. And many times I get personal messages saying that they couldn't understand this, they couldn't understand that. So you will ensure that by the time you finish your course, you will be in a position to apply your first tibial or wrist frame. Latency is a time interval between the operation and start of distraction process. Normally 5 to 7 days is given if your corticotomy has been a little violent, and you can start in 48 hours if the corticotomy has been very, very gentle. A latency over 3 weeks will cause a rigid bridge at the corticotomy site. If damage to medulla is minimal, distraction can be started on day 1. If there is some damage, one can wait up to 10 days before beginning distraction. Beyond 14 days, already the fracture will start getting sticky and you may not be able to pull it apart. So these durations and dimensions are very critical for a successful Ilizarov surgery. When compression fails to produce union in a hypertrophic situation, a piano accordion maneuver is used. You can see in this case, despite putting a frame, callus is not coming. The patient has been walking on it for 6 months and is not joining. What to do now? So piano accordion involves, like a harmonium, you distract and compress and distract. Not you, but the patient. So you ask him to distract by 2 millimeters, compress by 2.5 millimeters. Again distract by 2 millimeters, compress by 2 millimeters. And that's in a fixed schedule. So there's 1 week compression, 1 week distraction. This will again be taught to you eventually. I am only familiarizing you with the terminology today. I'm not even going to the instrumentation. Only basic concepts of bone healing and the terminology in Ilizarov fixations. Use of accordion method is for hypertrophic non-union that are slow to bond, slow union at the docking site, inadequate or hourglass type of regeneration from corticotomy site. Suppose you're rapidly expanding corticotomy and finally found that the corticotomy site has an hourglass like callus with very weak middle. You know the instant you remove the frame, it will break in the corticotomy site. So you do piano accordion of the corticotomy site. Make it that hourglass becomes a cylinder. Then only you disconnect. Likewise, you dock 2 fragments. You compress them, but still no healing is happening. So you open it, close it. Open it, close it. Healing happens. This can be also used in soft tissue deformities like club feet, where we distract both the concave and convex sides and then only compress the convex side. So in stubborn club feet, arthrokyphotic feet, older children, 7-8-year-old, neglected club feet and all, if you just take a wedge and compress the convex side, you will be left with a very short foot. If it's a bilateral club foot, both feet are the same shortness, the patient can accept. But in unilateral club foot, if the foot is 30% smaller than the other normal foot, and you make it further short to make it 40% small, the patient will have to wear 2 size different shoes, size 5 on one leg and size 7 on one leg. So here what we do, we distract both convex and concave sides. And once we get the deformity corrected, we give minimal compression to the convex side. And this way we have what? If not an equal, the foot is not shorter than what we started off with earlier. The magic of Ilizarov works across all age groups, on both sexes, on patients from every nationality and culture, on diabetics, hypertensives, those with metabolic diseases, tumors, soft tissue problems, congenital disorders, developmental diseases, and many, many other things. Every single method of fracture management apart from Milind Rao has one contraindication or the other. Exhibitors and psoriatic patients do not tolerate a plaster cast, so you cannot put a plaster on them. People with metal allergy cannot withstand plates and screws. If your theatre asepsis is not good, you will get infection in an implant, which is a disaster. Amongst all these, the only one method of fracture management which has got all these features is Milind Rao. So this was the lecture for today. Let me come back to the main talk, and here we go. Dr. Akhilesh Singh has come very late. So let me summarize what we have discussed until now. We have discussed what are the rules of fracture healing, how fractures unite, what is a detrimental micromotion, what is a beneficial micromotion, advantages and disadvantages of compression, and we have learned to define Milind Rao terminology like corticotomy, regenerate, distraction, trans-osseous osteosynthesis, piano accordion maneuver, etc., etc. In the next class, we shall be showing each and every instrument, first by drawings, then by photographs, then physically show the components so that you are familiar with it. One or two of our delegates are actually performing Milind Rao, and for them it will be a repetition. But for most of you who have not done many independent cases, that lecture is going to be very, very useful and relevant. So now today we'll open the questions. Please unmute your mic when you want to ask the question, and thereafter mute it. I have put it in such a view that only the one person can ask question at a time, and the person who is asking the question, his face will come here, and then I will give you an answer accordingly. If we want inputs on biological methods, we can ask Dr. Arvind Divakar, who is standing for Dr. Arvind Jagit because of Dr. Divakar's sickness. First question, please. No questions? Either the lecture was too complex and you couldn't understand anything, or it was so simple and easy that you understood every word, and so there are no questions at all. Now what we will do is, we will take all questions which may come to your mind subsequently in our WhatsApp group, and I will give written answers. After I disconnect, I am going to upload today's PDF file of today's talk for you to understand easily. In the evening, when I finish my editing the recording, I'll post that. Because this is not a specific talk about Milind Rao, and because this talk is general about fracture healing and maybe a beneficial to a large number of orthopedic surgeons, I seek your permission to actually post this on YouTube so that it may benefit people in general. And subsequent lectures and previous lectures along with the PDF files will be exclusive prerogative to you people who have registered for this conference. Any doubts, please feel free to ask on the WhatsApp group, and I shall be happy to give it to you. Thank you very, very, very much. Goodbye.